Cloud. Okay, so file to download for today, schedule 2.xlsm. And really today we got a day just kind of writing simple macro procedures. So I'm not sure there's a whole lot of new that we're going to cover today, but we'll give some kind of different ways to think about developing a solution to a particular problem. And well, there probably will be some stuff that's new, though I'm not sure it's what's actually in the textbook that's new for us. So as it turns out, when you're a faculty member, you've got responsibilities to teach, you've got responsibilities to do research, you've got responsibilities of service to the university. And one of my service assignments is that I am the academic scheduler for the Marriott School of Business. So the fact that this class is taught in this room on this day, I'm the one who ultimately approves that. And the truth is, I don't really approve anything unless there's a conflict where we got two faculty members who say, no, I got to have that room at that time. And someone else says, no, I need that room at that time. That's when my job gets ugly. But the rest of the time, it's usually just, yeah, whatever you want, you've got it. So this data comes from that domain. I think these are all the accounting classes that were offered in the Marriott School in fall of 2017. Any of you actually taking like the accounting junior core in fall of 2017? Here, could you? As some of you there, yeah. So this is your class. So, here was because we could look at who your instructor was. So accounting 401, that's in the core. So did you have Henniger or did you have Summers? You would have had one of them. Do you remember? Summers, Henniger, you both. Yeah, different. Yeah, we've come together finally, so that's great. So we have here, the course number, the building. It's all the Tanner building. That's the only thing I care about. Well, some of our classes go in other buildings, but then the catalog number, accounting 310, so forth, and the time that it is. So what our goal here for today, our task, we'll try to learn several things along the way, but what our task is to give us a visual representation of this. Can you imagine how difficult it would be for a human to look at this and say, when do we have rooms that conflict, right? Because trying to map this and say, wow, which of these classes are overlapping, and then again, if we're to say in the same room or the same department, we want to know, for the accounting department, which classes are taught at the same time, because they've got to figure out how to be able to get you guys to graduate. And it doesn't do any good if you've got two classes you have to take, there's only one section each and it's taught at the same time, right? That's a problem. They have to make sure that they don't do that to you. We're not always 100% at that, but we try to get that down. And so here's what I'd like to accomplish today is I would just like to take this data about when these classes start and when they stop, and I would like to put them over here graphically. So let me just do this by hand for this first one. So 12:30 to 1:45. So if I look over here, that would be what? That would be 12:30 would be that block, to ends at 1:45 would be right there. So what I'd like to do is make that into a particular color. I don't know. That's a nice color. Maybe that's a nice color. So, and if I had just a few of them, that might be the way I'd look at them. But the accounting department offers what, 54 different classes. The Marriott School offers hundreds and hundreds of classes every semester. And so I don't have to go do that by hand. Why don't I want to do that by hand? Well, I can hire an intern to do it. I don't care about the time so much. Interns are next to free. Student workers next to free also. The real problem is what? Yeah, it's gonna be full of errors. So I'd like to just be able to write a program that will just go and highlight the time block kind of in this, out here in this little area that we've put these things. So that's going to be our goal for today. So I'm going to go ahead and open up Excel. I've got a workbook, or rather a module already here, a sub-procedure called make schedule, and I think we're kind of ready to get started. So in fact, maybe for just review, let's just say we're going to want to iterate across all of these. We're going to do kind of one row at a time. So what kind of loop would be a good loop to do all this data? For next loop would be okay, but what do we have to know about the for next loop? If to do the for next loop, we have to know, up front we have to know, we have to know the number of iterations. So we could use a for next loop, and maybe we will, because that was the first answer that I heard. But that means step one would be to figure out what the last row is, and then we use a for next loop. If we use a do loop, then we can just kind of, each time we do a next one, we can just check to see, are we done, are we done, are we done, are we done? And so, we've We've done the do loop a few times to iterate across a set of data. So maybe we'll use the for next loop. But I saw a question, comment here. Oh, for each? We could do a for each loop too, but we would need to do something to first build the set that we're interested in, because the for each loop iterates across a set of objects, or a collection of objects, some set of objects. And so what we would need to do is we would have to first start off by identifying this range, and then we could do a for each in this range. Okay, which way do you want to do it? The do loop's the easiest one. You already know how to do it. So that's, that one's out. So it's either for or for each. Now the for each is probably the harder one, so it might make some sense to get a little practice with it. If we use the for each, yeah, whether we do the for next or the for each, we're going to have to figure out where this data ends before we start processing data. Nice thing about the do loop, we can just start processing until you run out of data, you're good. Let's go ahead and do this. Let's do it with a for next loop to start with, and then maybe we'll switch to the for each loop, and you can kind of see the difference of what it would take. Okay, so my make schedule, all I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by getting this loop just printing off the row numbers that I'm going to be processing, and then we'll make it a little more advanced. So if I'm doing a for next loop, I'm going to need a control variable that's an integer, some integer type. There's three data types that hold integer values. What are they? One's integer. I'll give you the easy one, integer. Then there's two others that hold integers with different ranges. Okay, single and double hold floating point numbers. There's single precision floating point number, double precision floating point number. Long is a long integer, and the really small one that's 0 to 255 is byte. Yeah, it's just a byte. It's just a really bad name, I think, because it says how much memory, but it doesn't really tell you anything about what kind of data it is. But it happens to be an integer, 0 through 255. So let me dim R as, and I'm going to do long. Now, we've only got 55 rows that we're dealing with here. So I could get by with integer or with byte. But it's only a matter of 1, 2, or 4 bytes of memory, tiny. And I think it's just a good habit to say this is going to refer to a row, make it a range that could go across all of your rows. So long can handle any row number that we've got, up to 1.04 million, however many there are, because what's the range for long? Yeah, plus or minus 2 billion. So we got plenty there. Okay. So now let's go ahead and build the for loop. For R equals, it's going to start in row number 2. Let's leave that blank for a minute. That'll give us a little error. By the way, would you like to see how to get this dialog box to stop popping up every time you make a mistake, make a line that's not complete? You should want to know that. I will show that to you now. Tools, options, auto syntax check. Taking that off. It will still show you the line red if there's a syntax error on it, but it won't nag you with the box. Especially because the only thing that box really does is it gives you a way to get help, and the help is usually no help at all. Let's also, while we're here, I'm just going to check require variable declaration. Did we talk about option explicit when we were talking about variables? So when I say require variable declaration, what that will mean is that anytime now when we create a new module, it'll automatically put option explicit at the top, which just says if you're going to use a variable, you have to declare it. Okay. And then, of course, next. So we need to do something to figure out how many rows there are. Now, we could put a whole expression here, right here inside the definition of the loop that would go figure that out. But just because it'll be a little bit better for us to break it up to kind of see the different steps, let me declare another one called, another variable called last row. Also as long, because it's referring to a row. And so we're going to go from 2 to last row, but we're going to need to figure out what last row is. So this is a little preview for something that's coming up when we start working with ranges, but watch this. Let me go ahead and bring up my immediate window. So you're familiar with the cells method. So I'll be on my active sheet, cells, and then I'll tell it which row I want. So I'll leave blank for a moment, which column I want, column 1. I'm gonna come back to that in just a minute, but I can ask this, I can ask how many rows there are on the active worksheet. Question mark, rows.count. It tells me there are 1.04 million rows on my worksheet. And so to refer to the very last cell in column 1, I could type in 1.048576, or I could say, just go figure it out. However many rows there are, that's the one. That's the row I'm talking about, the very last one. Now, why do I prefer doing it this way rather than this way? Who knows what's going to happen in Excel 2021? There might be 2 billion rows. And in that case, I really want to go to the very last one, refer to the last one, and then I want to come up. How would I find this data? Oh, you know what? Yeah, I already started this way, so let's do it this way. Might have been easier to go down, but I'm all the way down here. How do I go up until I bump into data? Just in Excel. Yeah. Control up arrow takes me up to the next contiguous cell. Incidentally, back in the days before the control button was invented, that was a long time ago, you used to do this through a different sequence. And I'm going to show this to you just so you can understand the VBA that I'm about to show you a little bit better. So with one keystroke, I'm going to type the end key. Now, I just typed that, and you'll notice right down here, bottom left-hand corner, it says I'm in end mode. Ooh, I'm in end mode. So now I can just hit the up arrow as a 2-keystroke sequence. Hit the end, release, hit the up arrow, and that's the same thing as doing control up arrow. I'm telling you that because the next part you're going to see will help you get there. So from this cell, this is going to refer to a particular cell. Each cell has a method called end, and I can tell it which direction I want to go, XL up. And so this is going to refer to a cell. I'm going to call the end method on that cell and tell it to go up, and this is going to refer to a cell. So which cell is this going to refer to? Yeah, the last cell in that column containing data. Now, I could have started at the top and done end XL down, but what that does is it says, you know what, if there's a break in here anywhere, it'll stop there. But this really gets me to the last data in this column. And so now I'm going to print the address just to make sure we're in the right place. And rows.count and XLF ADVRESS. There we go. So that tells me A55, and yeah, that's really the cell that I'm after. But if I don't want the address, all I'm interested is in the row of that, and that gives me the 55. And so that is the expression that will tell me the row number of the data, the last cell containing data in column 1. Last row equals that whole expression. And just to make sure, I've got a couple of worksheets here, so just to make sure I'm on the right worksheet, let me just go ahead and activate that sheet. Sheet1.activate. Okay, so now even if I run this on sheet 2, it'll first activate sheet 1, then we'll figure out what the last row is. And now I should be able to do a debug.print of R. And that should print, so the first time through, R will equal 2, should print 2. We'll get to the next, I'll add 1 to it, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way to 55. And then it should actually push it to 56, but then not run the loop once this next pushes it to 56. So if I run this now, it should just print off 2 through 55. So it starts at 2, goes down to 55. Question?
So normally you have to do like R equals R plus 1 to get it to iterate through all of them. Do you not have to do that with the 4 next?
So
automatically do it?
Yeah, so the question is, normally you got to say like R equals R plus 1 somewhere. And when you say normally, I think you mean the do loop, because that's the loop we've done most in class. And in the do loop is just loop. There's kind of no extra stuff happening behind the scenes. But with the for loop, it automatically does the R equals R plus 1. That's what next does. It says, hey, what's the control variable of this loop? Add 1 to it, or add whatever the step is. So if this is step 1, it'll be handled. But you could add 2 to it, or 3 or 4 to it, or whatever number you want to put here. So yeah, next is what is actually the statement that does two things. It increments the control variable and then sends you back up to the top of the loop. Okay. I'm going to leave that example just the way it is. And let's do it now with a for each loop. Ooh. Never done this before on this example. So let me dim a cell as a range. Somebody tell me what I just did here. Someone tell me what cell is? It's an object. Not quite there. There's another word that has to go on the end of that. The key is we're using the keyword dim here. So this is it's an object variable. Yeah, so all this, the name's arbitrary. I could have called it Q. I could have called it, maybe I should call it cell with just one L so you'll know it's not a reserved word or something. So this is just, a variable name. I'm gonna go ahead and leave it C-E-L-L. Oops, C-L-E-L. What kind of object can this object variable hook up to? Only ranges. Okay, so for each loop, I have to have an object control variable. Could also be variant, but object. Now, I'm also going to dim one called RNG as a range, because I'm going to need to first identify the range that has the data that I'm interested in. So let's go ahead and build that before we build our loop. So set RNG equal to, and what I really want here is I want range, and the range that starts in A2 and goes through A55. There's kind of several ways I could get here. I'm going to go the fastest route. I'm going to go the fastest route to this because we're going to have a whole day where we talk more about how we manipulate ranges. So what could I do here? Any thoughts? I've already calculated the last row. Last row is what? 55. I'm going to assume this data is going to start in A2. I'm assuming that for my other loop anyway. And so instead of having this string just hard-coded, I'm going to get rid of the 55 and just concatenate onto this last row. And then I'm just going to print the address of this range that I've just identified. What address do I expect to see here to have it print out? Yeah, A2 to A55. I've got the whole address right here. I've just kind of clipped on the 55 right here. Should still print off the first, 2 through 55 from the first loop. And now it's printed here A2 to A55. So now I have an object that I want to iterate over all the elements in. And a range actually is made up of all the cells that are in that range. So if I do a for each loop on a range, it's going to run once for each cell in the range. So let's go ahead and do a for each. For each cell in range. Debug.print cell.address. And so this should print A2, A3, A4, A5, A6. Because what happens here, like my control variable, for each iteration of the loop, my control variable points at a different object in whatever set of objects I'm using here. I'll run this again. So here we've printed off the address of the range, and now we're going to the loop A2, A3, A4, and so forth. Question here. Okay, so the question is, the cell variable has nothing to do with for each, or are they somehow related? And the answer is, the for each loop, just like the for next loop, says for and then it's some variable. For each is for each, and there's some variable. The for loop says, give me an integer variable. The for each loop says, give me an object variable here. And what this loop does, instead of just counting R to go higher, this one says, take this object variable. Remember, object variable just holds the address of some other object somewhere in memory. And it says, put the address of the first object in this collection into this variable. So that cell, when I print this the first time, cell is referring to the first cell in this range. Next time through the loop, this loop automatically reconnects this object variable to a different object. What does it do the second time through? A3. Third time through A4, and so forth. Yes? This right here? This right here? Okay, so here's what I'm trying to do. Let me take this up into the immediate window. So the question is, I'm not quite sure what you're doing here, Professor Allen.
I get to go from A2 to the last row. That's the rate. I just don't know if I understand why you need the quotation mark.
Okay. Okay, so here I have identified a particular range, and I've spelled out the whole thing. And so the question is, how come the quotes are the way they are right here? And so what I'm saying is that I know everything about how this place starts. It starts in A2. It's going to stay in column A. The only thing I don't know going into this is how many rows there are. Because, the next time we run this, accounting is going to offer more classes or less classes or whatever. Or maybe I'm going to run this on another sheet that has marketing classes, and that'll be a different number as well. So what I'm doing is I'm saying I want to take the part that I know is always the same, and I'm going to concatenate onto it something that evaluates to what I'm done with. So in this case, I just have the 55 hard-coded in. In this case, I have calculated what that last row is here. So I'm just saying bring on that 55, glue it onto the end of this expression so that I have really just that happening. And the whole reason that I'm doing that is because for this for each loop to work, I've got to have a set of objects to iterate across, because it's going to execute once for every object in the set. Okay? Question here.
I have the same question. I feel like I understand what's happening, but like syntax.
Oh, so why is this in quotation marks? So what the quotation marks do is the quotation marks say to the interpreter, this is not something for you to figure out. This is not referring to some object or some variable or some method or some procedure or anything else. This is just a collection of letters for you to deal with. When the interpreter looks at this part right here, it says last row. I got to figure out what that means. Oh, that's 55. We don't want it to look at A2 and say, I got to figure out what that means. It doesn't mean anything. It's just A2. Could I make a variable named A2? Is that a valid variable name? Yeah, it starts with a letter. Only letters, numbers, the underscore character. It's a valid variable name. And so what we don't want, imagine if we had that. This would be kind of a bad variable name, but dim A2 as a string or as a standard font, STRING. Okay, we have to tell the interpreter, don't you go look at what A2 is and plug its value in here. This is really just A2. It's not the value of the variable named A2. And that's what the quotes do. The quotes identify this as what's called a string literal. It's just those characters. Don't try to figure them out. Just hold those characters in place, because it's the range method that knows what to do with them, with the string. Did that get your question? Okay. Whew. And I guess we're going to make these loops the same. Instead of printing the address, we could print the row of that cell, and then it would just print the number, the same numbers that the upper loop does. Okay, are you ready to actually dig in and solve the problem? Let's go ahead and do it. So let's do, here's what I'm going to do. Instead of trying to write the logic inside to one of these loops, instead I'm going to write the logic to process one row all by itself. So I'm going to write all the logic it takes to do one row across, similar to what we've done on the assignment that's due for tonight. Right? You wrote the logic to just go get information for one ticker, and then you have a loop that says just run that over and over again. I got a similar problem here. I've got a whole bunch of things I got to do the same thing to. Let me write a sub procedure that just does one, and then a separate structure that makes it iterate. Well, we've already written the part that makes it iterate. So let's just make another sub procedure here. I'll call it, what was this one called? Make schedule. I'll just call this make one schedule. Or, yeah, make one schedule. Okay, I think we have seen the ability to declare a variable inside these parentheses. We've seen that now, haven't we? Let's go ahead and do that here as well. Let's call this one row as a long integer. So here's the idea. What I'm going to do is I'm going to call make one schedule. So instead of debug.print on one of these loops, I'm going to call make one schedule, and I'm going to pass it the value that I want row to take. So remember before, this was printing 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. Now it's going to call, each time it's going to call make one schedule, and it's going to print, or it's going to call this and assign the value 2 into this variable row. Question?
So as long as in the initial subparameters, because we called row R in that, but it's okay that it's a sub that's called row because it's transferred R and you got two.
Okay, yeah. So the question is, hey, way up here in this for loop, you've got something referring to each row. You made a variable called R. And you're actually using that to refer to these different rows. Well, down here, you've got another variable. You're calling it row. Shouldn't you just call that R? And I could have called it R, and it would have worked just fine. But I want to make clear that it doesn't have to be called R. Right? This is just a variable, and I'm going to pass in, from here, I'm going to pass in the row of the cell that we happen to be pointing to. If I was calling this from up here inside this one, maybe I'll leave the debug.print on that one. What do I put here instead? Yeah, well, not T, R. So it says call this sub procedure and give, because we've got an argument, we've got a parameter down here, give this value to the parameter. Question?
Could you explain just briefly what the make one schedule cell.row is trying to do? Like, is that just the address of the row? Or is that all that's?
Okay, so the question is, what is this down here? No.
Like right there, yeah.
This one right
Is
here?
that just giving the address of the row?
You mean, what is this doing right here?
Yeah.
Okay, so the question is, what is this? Let me just talk about this line. So what I'm trying to do, let's back up just a little bit. So we haven't written any logic for make one schedule, but what it should do by the time we're done with it is that I should give it a row. I should give it a 43, and when I give it 43 and call that sub procedure, it should look here and go 1230 to 145. Oops, I got to find 1230 to 145. Oh, it's right there. But it's gonna highlight that same block on 43, but just do it down here. It's gonna actually highlight or change the background color of the right set of cells so I can kind of see visually that that's that particular set. That's the idea. So then what we have up here, and we're calling it twice just because we've got two different examples here, but this is then going to say call that sub procedure and give it the row of the first cell in my set, which is A2, so it'll send a 2, because this will be just the row of that first cell. Next time through the loop, cell is going to refer to A3, and this will send a 3 down. So the variable row will be 3, and we'll have this work on doing what it does with 3 as the row that it's working on. Got it? All right, if you're still a little bit hazy about that, hopefully once you actually, we build it and you'll see it work, you'll go, oh yeah, I get it. We tell it which row to run on, and it runs on that row. Okay? Other questions? Yes?
So basically just the cell.row is the value that's going into the log variable.
So the question is, so just what we're saying here is that cell.row is just the value that's being passed to this variable down here. Yes, that's exactly right. This variable, by the way, when you declare a variable inside the parentheses like this, you don't use the keyword dim, because the only thing you can do inside those parentheses is declare a variable. That variable becomes a special kind of variable called a parameter. I don't think it's important that you know that name, but I'm not going to test you on, ooh, what's that called? Well, maybe that would be a good question, but probably not for this year. So it's just a variable that gets its value when the sub procedure is called. So call the sub procedure. We give it a value here. That value then gets assigned to row. In fact, watch this. Debug.print row. I'm going to comment at, which one do you guys want to work with? Do you want to work with the for next or the for each? I'm going to comment one of these out. Okay, I'll comment out the for each. And I'm not going to print this one. But yeah, maybe I will. I'll print that one, and then down here, I'm going to make this a little bit longer. Now scheduling row number ampersand, whoops, space ampersand. So now when I come up here and run my make schedule, it should print 2, and then it will call make one schedule, pass it 2, should be received into this row, and it should say now scheduling row number 2. And then it should print 3, now scheduling row number 3. This will print 4, now scheduling row number 4. Let's just see if that's what it does. If it doesn't do that, it's time for me to retire. Oh, whew, I don't have to retire yet. So that gets printed by this line. We then call that sub procedure, passing it that same value. This one has a different print statement, but it still has the same value because it got passed down to the other variable. Okay, question? So what you're saying is you'd like to run this. So you're right down here and you like press F5 or you hit the run button, and that's not an option. So the reason this isn't an option is that the only thing that I can just run directly is sub-procedures that don't take any values. It's saying, well, you just told me that you wanted to run make one schedule, but it can't run make one schedule because to call make one schedule, I have to give it a value for row. It has to have a value for this variable. It doesn't know what to do. What would it print here? What would it print if I just told it to run this? It's got to have a value passed. There's no value passed to it, so it can't run it. And so that's right. You don't get to just run this one directly as soon as we say we've got a parameter here. That may not have been a very satisfying answer. But in fact, we would like to be able to run this one just by itself. We'd like to be able to run it by itself because, this doesn't work yet. And you know what? We're going to make a whole bunch of mistakes while we're trying to figure out the code. And I don't want it to run, all 54 rows each time. I can see the mistake on one. I don't need to see 54 mistakes. One's enough to let me know I got the problem. So here's what we'll do. I'm going to maybe come just right above this one. I'm going to make another sub procedure. I'm going to call it my Acme sub runner. That's a great name, isn't it? I chose Acme as the kind of a generic name for some unknown company, but because alphabetically it's small. So now I'm going to have this one run make one schedule, and I'm going to pass it a 2. That's what I'm trying to do. So now if I run my Acme sub runner, it will run make one schedule, but it will give it a value to come into the row variable. But now if I'm working down here on make one schedule and I hit F5 to run it, because my Acme sub runner is alphabetically first, it's the one that comes up highlighted. And so I can just hit enter and it will run it. So F5, whoops. F5 on one that can't run by itself. What do you want to run? Just run whatever. And that has now run this one, which passes my test value here. So the whole purpose of this is just for convenience while working here in the editor. By the time I'm done with this, I should probably delete that sub procedure and get rid of it. But the truth is I'll forget to do that. It'll stay in the code forever. Okay, So now let's talk about solving this problem in English. We've got to make this highlight that set of cells. Oof. What are we going to do? Well, I and J are the two columns that are going to be important to us. So we've got, well, let's just narrow it down to I. This is going to tell us where we're going to start, which block we're going to start with. So any thoughts? We've got to convert 1230p into, I'm going to see what that is. Let me print the active cells column. To a 33. I've got to look at 1230 and go 33. How am I going to do it? Okay, this experience that we're having right now is what makes this class different than a lot of the classes that you've had before. Especially show my accounting students. Okay, accounting students, I'm one of you, right? I graduated from the back program here. And what those accounting classes were like, they were like this. Here's the generally accepted accounting principles, right? Here's the rules about how you do something. Learn this rule, and then we'll give you some input. You apply the rule and give you some output. This is totally different. What am I saying? 33, here's the output you have to give. Here's the input, 1230. I'm not telling you what's here. This is backwards from how you're used to doing this. 33, you gotta make something up. You gotta invent something to turn 1230 into 33. And that same thing has to turn 8 o'clock a.m. into whatever O is. 11, 12, 13, 14. You gotta turn an 8 into a 15. This is not easy. And you can't memorize your way through it, right? This is something creative. I have some good news for you. You are all sons and daughters of a creator. So this is in your nature to be able to solve a problem like this. But it's a different kind of problem. This is an unstructured problem. All your accounting homework are structured problems. Take the inputs, apply the solution, or apply the algorithm, get the answer. This is unstructured. You know the answer, but you don't know how to do it. So let's go ahead and figure this out. So we got to have some creative thoughts. So throw something out. Give me something that might be helpful towards getting me to being able to figure this out. There's a comment here, and then maybe another question here.
Is there a way that we can say, so we take 1230 and we have defined column O as like our starting point?
Okay, so here, we don't care about columns A through N. We're not going to do anything with there. So somehow our starting point is going to be column O. And what did I just say column O was? Let me just go ahead and make sure that that was right. Did I say it was 13 or I think it was 15? Let's ask that one again. Okay, so that's 15. Okay, so what you're saying is it might be helpful to know that's where we start. So let's go ahead and do that, and then I'll take the rest of your question. Okay, so I want to be able to say, great, start at 15. I could create a variable and then assign that value, but this is something that's not going to change while we're not going to do something that like inserts a column over there in column 3 and pushes this whole thing over. Its O is going to be 15. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give that a name. I'm going to give that number a name. So instead of saying dim, I'm going to say const. A const and dim do exactly the same thing. They allocate memory. They give a name to that location in memory so that we can put a value there. But the difference between a variable and a constant is that a variable you can change all throughout your program. A constant, you give it the value while you're writing the program and it stays. If you want to change the value, you got to change the code in the program. You can't change it while it's running. So constant, I'm going to call this first call as integer. Because the column number, I like to use integer. Integer plus or minus 32,000. There's only 16,000 columns. This works just fine. But integer is neat because I can give it its value right here, equals 15. And so in one statement, I can just say, allocate the memory, plug this into it, and we're good to go. Okay, so I think that's pretty good. What you said is, somehow, we got to start here in column 15. Okay, Other thoughts? Okay, comment here. Okay, you're giving me way too much. Let's start with the first thing you said. You said each hour is 4 cells. Ah, so that's pretty good. So if we know that we've got to get to the 12th hour, well, how many hours is it really from our starting point? We're starting at 8 o'clock in column 15. So we've got to figure, let's start just by figuring out what the hour of our starting time is. Okay, so here we've got our starting time. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get this to print off just that starting time. So we're now scheduling row number whatever, and then let's also print start time and concatenate on, okay, how am I going to print the start time? And it has to be, right? If I pass a 2 down here, the start time needs to be 12:30. If I pass a 3 down here, the start has to be 8. So what am I going to do? What expression can I put here that will print 12:30 when I pass a 2 in and will print 8 when I pass a 3 in? Go ahead. Oh, all I'm trying to do, I'm trying to get to 12:30. I'm trying to actually get 12:30 here. We may do what you just suggested in a moment, but so how do I want this to say, when I call this with a 2, I always want to say start time 12:30, 12:30 p.m. Yeah.
If you're passing in the row, then you can have it search for that row and you're in the column next to value, that stuff.
Okay, so dot value is how we're going to get the thing out. Good. You said search. I don't quite know how to do the search. I know.
Just cross-reference R and the whatever I is.
That's right. I need a method or a statement, something in VBA. Talk to me in VBA. Cells, and then I'll tell it. I'll put the column in. The column is I. By the way, cells can take for the column. It can actually take a string and put a letter in there. Caps lock. How do I make a lowercase I? There we go. And what do I put here? Here's the magic. What do I put here? Yeah, row, right? When I call this, I'm sending it down a number to tell it which row to work on, and that's being captured in this variable here called row, and so I will put here row. Okay, so now if I run this, it should. Now scheduling row number 2, start time is 12:30 p.m. Okay, great. So now I would like to know what the start hour is. That's what we said. We got to pull the hour off of this. Let me give myself another variable. I guess folks typically like to put their constants first and then their variables. I don't really care. Var start hour as, what's the right data type for the start hour? Just going to be, 8, 12, 1. Yeah, probably byte. Integer between 0 and 255. There's only 12 hours in a day. Well, 24 hours in a day, but we're going to narrow it down to 12. I mean, we will do 24. But anyway, still not getting anywhere near 200. So as byte. Okay. Var, oh, sorry, wrong language. Little JavaScript there. This would be dim. Dim start hour as byte. No extra charge for the JavaScript instruction. It's free. Okay, so as it turns out, there is, I can take a string. Let me just bring a string here, 12:30 p.m. And that'll print 12:30 p.m. But I can convert this into a time. I can actually say convert to time. Oh, convert to date. There's a function, part of VBA, called cDate, convert to date. And that will take that string and it will try to make it into a time, try to understand that as a date. And it goes, oh, you mean 12:30 and 0 seconds p.m. That's what you meant when you said 12:30 p. And if I tried to give it something it can't convert, like x 12, 30, it'll just go, I don't know what you're talking about. I couldn't do it. But that's pretty good. So now that I've got a date, there's a function called hour. I can just ask for the hour of a date. Give me the hour of a date, H-O-U-R. And that gives me just the 12. Incidentally, if I tried to ask for the hour of a string, you know, some string that it can't figure out, it'll go, yeah, we don't know what you're talking about. We can't figure out the hour of that. But even if it's a string, I haven't expressly converted it into a date, and I ask for the hour of it, the VBA interpreter saying, you're asking for the hour of a string. Strings don't have hours. But before I give up, let me look at that string and see if I can make a date out of it. Oh, yeah, I can make a date out of that. And then I can figure out the hour. It does that for you. And so you don't even need to convert it to a date. You can just ask for the hour of a string. And as long as it can figure out, you know, some time expression, we'll go, yeah, I can figure the hour out. So now I've got start hour. All I have to do is ask for the hour of that thing that I just printed. So start hour equals the hour of that time. Pretty good. So far, so good? All right, let's also calculate the start minute because we're going to have to know the minutes as well. Dim start, maybe just start min as a byte. That should be okay for byte as well. Can you guess how to get to the start minute? Yeah, there's a minute function too. So now I have separated out the start hour and the start minute. I've got to somehow calculate the start column using this stuff. So I'll go ahead and create another variable called start column or start call as an integer. Oops, dim. And now I think I'm ready to figure out where this thing starts. Start call equals. Well, the very smallest one it could possibly be is what? 15. Maybe I should actually just put the 15 in for that. I'm gonna put that 15 in there for now. We're gonna back it off to our constant here in just a minute. So start column is gonna be 15 plus something. All right, so when it's 8 o'clock, I've got to add 0 columns. When it's 9 o'clock, I got to move 4 columns over. I got to add, when it's 10 o'clock, I got to move 8 columns over and so forth. So help me out. What can I do here? Yep.
You could do the start hour minus 8.
Okay, so the hour I'm starting on 12. So we'll take start hour. Now you're saying minus 8 because 8's my first time. So when I have 12, I've got to move over 4 sets. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Start hour minus 8. And multiply that by 4. Now the multiplication is going to happen before that addition, but because I've got this in parentheses, that subtraction should happen first. I might sleep better at night if I put parentheses around that first, even though the order of operations would make it happen that way anyway. So I'm going to take 15, I'm going to add on to that, start hour minus 8. So for 12, that'll be 4, times 4, that'll be 16. Is that right? If I'm 15, I'll add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Did I count that right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Yeah, that looks right. Huzzah. Let's just see if that's what I think it's going to be calculating. So let me just go ahead and debug.print. I'm going to have a bunch of these debug.prints just to be able to tell what's going on in my life. start, I'm going to call this start call. And I'll just print out start call. And I'll run it. 31, is that the one I want? Yeah, I think AE is 31. Yeah, 31. Okay. I got my starting column. Woohoo! I got to get my ending column. Good news. What's the good news? Oh, we haven't got the minutes yet. Yeah, I've got the starting column just for the hours. We got to do the minutes. Ugh. Okay, got start min. So start call isn't quite there. This gets me to the hour, and then I want to add on to this my start minute. Okay, what do I got to do for the minutes? Go ahead.
Could you, from there, offset by start min divided by 15? Because then it's going to offset you by.
Okay, so you're saying my start minute goes in the range from 0 to 59. And so you're saying take that number, divide it by 15, whatever it is, divide it by 15. And then that tells me, because that'll say you've got 4 different, you're cutting that into 4 segments. Yeah, I like it. Let's just work on the divide part here for a minute. Can I do that when I have a syntax error? Yeah. Okay, so what do I have here? I've got 30. So you're saying if I take 30 and divide it by 15, that should give me my next 2 blocks that I have to move over. Now this is only going to work because what if it's not 30? What if I have a class that starts at like 20? That's going to be a problem because I can't move over 1.3 cells. But a quick look at that data shows me I don't have classes starting then. I got them starting on the hour and the half hour. I got them ending at 450, but at least here I'm okay. All right, so I like it. Let's start with that. We might have to get a little more specific. So what you're saying is take my start minute divided by 60, divided by 15, plus start minute divided by 15. So that should give me 33, which is what I need for this one. Gives me a start column of 33. Questions? Okay, in-class exercise. Calculate the ending column. So we've got a template, right? We're calculating the starting column. You calculate the ending column. My hope is that each of you will at this point say, I can get started on this. I may not be sure that I can finish it, but I'm going to get started on it. Is there anyone here who's going, I have no idea what to do next? If so, we'll come and give you a hand. Okay, let me show you what I did while we were on that little class exercise. I just said, listen, I've got this whole thing for start hour. I'm just going to duplicate it, make an end hour, just exactly parallel. In fact, what I did was I opened up Notepad, I copied my code in there and just said find start, change it to end, and that will just save typing for me. So I've got that block. I've got an analogous, where I had my start hour, my end, or my start minute. I've now got an end hour and an end minute. This one I also had to change to look at the right column. I have to look at column J instead of just column I, because it's the next column over is where the ending time is. And then my ending column, we're not quite here for the ending column. So we've got the minutes, and we're going to convert these minutes divided by 15. And here's where we have the problem that we've got a fractional fractional thing. Now, as it turns out, because my ending column is already an integer, it can't take a portion, it can't take a decimal value. Now, in some respectable programming languages, you try to assign a decimal to an integer and it will just say, sorry, you can't do that. But what does VBA do? VBA goes, I'm gonna round it. You gave me a decimal, I'm gonna round it. So this is gonna round. And this may be good enough for us. Here's the question. So if we end at 450, where is that gonna take us? It's gonna give me, we have to look at the numbers, but we want to round up. So, but what if we ended it at something like 420? If we ended at 420, VBA is just going to round it down. Is that okay? Or is it not okay? Well, it would probably be better if we actually had a little more precision so you could see where it was. But of course, what we want to know is that block being used, then we've got to round up always. So how are we going to get my end minute and column? My end minute is a certain number of minutes. My end column, I've got to get this part to round up. Whew. There is a round function in VBA, but it just rounds. You want to round up. Go ahead.
The internet said there's a round up whole function. I don't know if that's true.
The internet says, what does it say it again? Round up whole?
Round up whole. So
I've never heard of it. I'd be surprised. Let's take a look. So you're saying there's a round. You looked at the internet. Oh, that's cheating. Of course, it's not cheating. Round up whole. Like that?
yeah.
I put 1.1. So my guess is going to go, I have no idea what you're talking about. It could be there. I would be surprised. Yeah, it doesn't know what that is. Okay, but there is, in Excel, there's a function called roundup, right? Roundup. Sounds like a weed killer. So it turns out you can call Excel functions from VBA. Here's how you do it. Worksheet function dot round up 1.1. And then I got to tell it how many decimal points. What do I do here? 0? Whoops. Round up to 0 decimal points, and that will round it up. So I should be able to take that. Truth is, I don't think I've ever actually done this part right. I've done this example maybe 3 or 4 times before. I don't think I've ever done this part right. So I'm just going to call the round up function and pass it 0 decimal points. We're still not quite there, and I'm not sure that's exactly right, but once we run across the whole data, we've got 5 minutes, so I think we'll have time to do it. I think we're getting close. Let's call that good for now, and let's actually use the start column and end column to actually build a range and highlight that range. So now that we've got these, I should be able to say, I want to refer to a range. So we'll assume we're on the active sheet, and then we're just going to say range. Now, we're going to get familiar with this syntax later. I'm going to do a little preview of something we're going to study in a little more detail. Typically, when we say range, we put in quotes the range we're talking about. And we could do that. But we can also give it 2 cells. We can actually, instead of giving a single string, we can give it 2 cell references. So I can say cell number, we're always talking about cell number row, column number start call. And then the second range is the ending cell of the range. So cells, row number, row, column number, end call. Dot, and to change the color, we'll say dot interior, dot color equals BB green. Colors, incidentally, in Excel are some number between 1 and 16 some odd million. It's just a different number. 255 is red, kind of perfect red. 666 is kind of a dark red, coincidentally. And then there's some, and then Visual Basic has some colors named. VB green. It's not going to print something green. It's going to print a number that maps to an Excel color. That's a green color. Oh boy, I think that's going to work. Let's run this and see. Underscore, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and run this. No errors, that's a good sign. Oh, that looks pretty good. I'm almost there. What am I missing? It's not a problem with my, I don't think it's a problem with my rounding. I think this is always going to give me one cell further than I want. And so I think I just want to subtract one off of it. So end call, I could subtract one off to kind of wrap that off. Or you know what, I could just make this to 14. That would effectively subtract one off of it. Problem is if I run this again, I'll change the color because it's not going to redo that. I'm going to change this to 666. So the green is still there because I didn't undo it. But now I've got that. But okay. Looks pretty good. Should we run the whole thing and see if it works? And that way we can kind of check, see how it handled 450 to know if we did that right. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to come up here to my make schedule, and I'm going to start off by, after I activate sheet 1, I'm going to get rid of all the background color on this. So I'm just going to say cells. This is interesting. Normally we say cells and we give it a row and a column. But if you just say cells and don't tell which row and a column, which cells is it talking about? All of them. Cells.interior, whoops, I-N-T-E-R-I-O-R, dot. Now, the way that you wipe it out, get rid of all the colors with the color index property. So the color index equal to XL none. XL none is a built-in constant. It's like negative 4,000 something, but it's a number that just says there's no color at all. It's not white, it's not gray, it's no color. So that should wipe out all the color, and then it should use that red color to put all these time blocks in. And I'm interested to see how my 450 got handled. So I enter here, so 3. This one starts at 330 to 450, is that what that was? Yeah, 330 to 450. First of all, is it starting in 330 right? Yeah, it's starting in 330 correctly. And it's going to 450. Yeah, that should take up the whole 4 o'clock hour just before 5 o'clock. So now I've given myself a way to visualize when these different classes are offered. Now, really to do this right, I've got to do something dealing with what days of the week they're offered on as well, because it's not really a conflict unless they're offered, they conflict with the hours. So it's more sophisticated, but this was just to get us used to the idea of, you know, just kind of working with sub-procedures, taking a problem and cutting it up into smaller pieces and see a few more things in code. Questions? Okay, I think we have a homework assignment due tonight. If you have questions about that, I'll be glad to stay after for a little while and answer any questions that you may have. Are there any more TA hours this evening? Nope, so hopefully you're good or ready to go. Class dismissed.